In my last live, some people asked me, hey, are you going to do a Christmas video? And honestly, I had no idea what they were talking about. Were they talking about like a Christmas themed video? A video on Christmas? I didn't really know what to answer. And unfortunately, there seemed to be issues with the broadcast, so I wasn't able to answer all questions. At some point, it kind of like froze, and I just didn't get any of the other questions after that. So I never really got an answer to that. But it's the holidays, might as well do something. And I'm like, what should I do? Because my first thought was, let's express my gratitude for everyone and everything that I have in my life. But kind of did that in the last video. So instead, I thought I'd do something embarrassing and sing. It's in the word embarrassing. Had to do it, so it's happening. Feliz Navidad, Feliz Navidad. Feliz Navidad, prospero año y felicidad. Feliz Navidad, Feliz Navidad, Feliz Navidad, prospero año y felicidad. I want to wish you a Merry Christmas. Okay, don't worry, I'm not going to sing the entire song. I just thought I'd have a little fun with it. No, what I actually decided to do was, you know, explain a little bit about my background, how we used to do Christmas, how for a long period of time we didn't really celebrate Christmas. And also, I wanted to talk about my grandmother because she was pretty much the only reason we did celebrate Christmas. Because, as you've known if you watch my videos, my parents didn't believe in religion. They raised us as atheists. So, to them it wasn't really that important. Plus, let's be honest, they didn't have that much money. And they thought it was very important to always have a parent at home, especially with my autistic brother. Like, they had to have someone there to take care of him all the time. So, one of my parents would work while the other one would stay at home. So as a result of that, we didn't always have that much money. So it's like, they definitely weren't the type to go out and like, decorate a ton and buy a ton of presents and everything. So what we do for Christmas when we were young is go to my grandmother's house and spend Christmas Eve there. And, exchange presents and everything. So it's like we went through the ritual. We did have that as children, and I am grateful for that, even though, I do remember at some point my sister and I made up like silly words to a Christmas song, and to this day I still remember them. I won't share them because they're slightly offensive. We were kids. And also because they're in French, and I know most people who watch the channel don't speak French. So let's kind of skip over that. But the thing about my grandmother is, she was raised religious more than my parents. I feel like that's why, at least my mother is not religious. She's an atheist because my grandmother was raised religious. And when she grew up, religion was much more important than it is nowadays. So I think that's kind of why she went the opposite direction. But anyway, as I mentioned, my grandmother was more religious and more, old-fashioned. And what she'd do is every single Christmas, Christmas Eve, she'd take me and my sister, and we'd go to the hospital where she worked, and we'd sing Christmas carols for the people who were there and weren't able to be with their family. And even though it's, like when you were young, you're like, I don't want to be here, I don't want to be forced to do this. Like, having those memories, they're fond memories to me. And it's like, without that, I probably would not know any Christmas songs. Like, okay, let's be honest, I don't know any Christmas song. I don't know all the words by heart, but it's like I know them well enough that it's like if someone gives me a sheet of paper, it's like, yeah, I can sing the song. And by the way, in case you're wondering, the reason why I chose that song that I sang in the beginning is obviously because of my wife, because she speaks Spanish. So I'm like, if I am gonna sing a Christmas song, there has to be some Spanish in it, Kind of got to do that. So I just remember those memories fondly. It's like, be spending Christmas with my grandmother. It's like, sure, we also spent it with my aunt who lived with my grandmother, and she hated kids. Never really had a good relationship with her. She was kind of the example of what I did not want to become. She was like very overweight, very unhealthy, grumpy, didn't like kids, like dead end job that she had her entire life, ended up like, getting both her legs amputated from diabetes, ended up dying from diabetes eventually. So it's just like our relationship was okay, she's what I don't want to be. And sometimes that's a good thing. So it's like I am grateful for that. But on the holidays, Christmas Eve, she was more tolerable, let's say. Just because most of the times, like whenever we went to go visit my grandmother, it's like obviously we loved her grandmother. She was super kind and typical doting grandmother. But our aunt, like every time she saw us, it's like she didn't necessarily physically groan of like those fucking kids are there. But it's like that was always the impression we got. Like we could sense it. So yeah, not everything was perfect on Christmas when we went, but it was definitely nice to spend time with our grandmother. Most of the time, my uncle was there. I have two uncles on my mother's side. One of them moved to Brazil a long time ago, so we didn't really see him that often. Every once in a while, he'd come back, but not every year. But pretty much every year, my other uncle, who was pretty much like the coolest uncle to me. To me, like, he was like the coolest person in the entire world. Like, he worked for the RCMP for his entire career. In case you don't live in Canada and you don't know what that is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, which is pretty much the top of the top when it comes to law enforcement in Canada. It's basically the FBI of Canada, if you will. Um, so to me, it's like, he's like super cool uncle, like, he's like a super cop, like he was even in SWAT for a while. And, like traveling all over the country, sometimes going to different countries to, help out and do stuff. And it's like, he was also pretty good with the ladies. So it's just like, to me, he was the coolest uncle ever. And it was just nice because pretty much almost every Christmas, he'd come back and spend the holidays, and it was nice to see him and everything. Plus, because we didn't get to see him that often because of his job, he kind of made up for that by buying us like cool gifts. So that was also a bonus. But anyway, all that to say, it was definitely nice to spend Christmas or Christmas Eve with my grandmother and, my mother's family because my father's family lives, like in a city far away from here, like a good 7, 8 hours of driving. So we wouldn't go visit them that often. Usually we'd spend Christmas with my grandmother on my mother's side, and then we'd go visit them, maybe for New Year or something like that, but it's like not as often. So I've been more exposed to, my mother's side of the family than my father's side of the family. And anyway, something I wanted to mention about my grandmother. She worked for a very long time in a hospital. I mean, she was a nurse. That was her job. So it's like obviously she spent her entire career in hospitals, but for a period of time, she worked as a palliative care unit nurse. So basically, it's like she's there taking care of patients that are on their deathbed that are waiting to die. So it's like, given the situation that I'm in, even though I'm not, at that stage yet, it still kind of reminds me of my grandmother, especially because of the holidays and the fact we used to spend the holidays with her when we were young. And it just, reminds me of how good of a person she was. And it's like, she was a nurse, she helped people her entire life. And it's like, once she was done, once she retired, she would like, donate some of her time to go like help people and stuff like that. She was just like such a caring, loving person. And that's what really the holidays reminds me of. Even though it's like, as we grew up, we kind of stopped celebrating because to my parents it was never important. They kind of just did it for us kids. But as we kind of became teenagers, young adults, stuff like that, it just kind of like became less and less of a thing. And then, when my mother left, it's like it just completely changed everything. And, eventually, once I moved out, because of kind of what I was taught by my parents and everything, I just never really saw Christmas as important. I just saw, it's like kind of a made up holiday. Like, I'm not religious. Plus, like, it's so commercialized at this point that it's like it doesn't really have that much to do with religion, like anyway. And I just kind of like, I don't know, I saw it kind of like the way my parents saw it, of like it's just a waste of time and energy and money buying presents for people that, they probably won't even like the presents, but they feel obligated to keep them because it was a present and blah blah blah. And it's like that's kind of was my perspective for a long time. But more recently, especially as I'm going through what I'm going through, and now that I'm married, and especially now that it's like I can't be with my my wife for Christmas. Like last Christmas, I spent it in Nicaragua with my wife, her family, and everything. And this year, it's like, yeah, I'm gonna go spend time with my sister and her family, as well as my father. But it's gonna be like after Christmas, so it's like I'm gonna spend Christmas alone this year. And it just kind of like gets me thinking of the past and my grandmother and things like that, because my grandmother passed away a few years ago, and it's just like she was one of the most important and influential and positive people in my life. So I just, I miss her, of course. And around the holidays, especially when, most people spend time with family, it just kind of gets you thinking about stuff like that. So I just wanted to take the time to really share, uh, kind of how I grew up, how I saw Christmas for a long time, and also, just like how awesome my grandmother was, because she truly is the most, or truly was the most amazing and generous person that I've known in my entire life. And, I hope that what I'm going through, me sharing this, I can have even like a fraction of the impact on others by motivating them and encouraging them or whatever I can do that she had on me. So I thought it was important to share that. So thank you for watching. Merry Christmas. And hopefully you get to spend it with family, because the older I grow and the more that I'm faced with, the reality that you never really know how long you have, the more important I realize that spending quality time with family and friends, and, obviously I'm talking about like, your chosen family as well, such as friends and things like that. But yeah, it truly is important. So I hope you get to spend time with your family. Merry Christmas, and I'll talk to you, well, probably tomorrow, let's be honest.